On this episode of the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, we have some friends in the house. Brian and Dave are here from the American Camp Association, and we're excited to talk with them about character at camp. Welcome to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. We're behind the mic and behind the research, turning insights into impact and numbers into North Stars for camping ministries and the intrepid leaders that serve them. Each episode blends thoughtful theology, compelling data, and actionable wisdom, all to help camps thrive today, tomorrow, and for years to come. I'm your host and producer, Jared Rendell, Director of Innovation and Communication for Sacred Playgrounds. Joining me is Director and Lead Researcher, Jake Sorensen, a PhD-level scholar, experienced ministry practitioner, and the founder of Sacred Playground. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, the support button to help make these episodes happen, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at Sacred Playgrounds, and always at sacredplaygrounds.com. Explore with us what God might have in store at your Sacred Playground. Welcome to the playground, everyone, and welcome to this virtual playground. Brian, Dave, thank you guys. I'll say it a lot. Thank you a ton for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so we invited Dave Bollen and Brian Massey from the American Camp Association to come chat with us today. It is good when we get to sit down with partners, with folks who we get to hang out with in different contexts. Jake has spent a handful of time at different ACA conferences, in this part advisory role with Character at Camp. And so we've been thinking for a while, as lots of our listeners, lots of camps who listen to this podcast, either have applied, did apply, got a grant, are thinking about some of the upcoming things. And so really grateful for this chance, you guys, to talk about this, to peel back the curtain a little bit and hear some updates from what's gone so far and talk about what's ahead. Let's give a chance for you to say hello first. Brian, would you just say hello, introduce yourself, quickly just share your role at ACA?
Hi, Jared. Thank you so much for having us. It's so nice to chat with you, be on the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. My name is Brian Massey. My job title is Director of Innovation with the American Camp Association. And I, among other things, do a lot of work with the Character Grant Program and the Character Camp Initiative.
Dave Bollen. I am a Grantee Success Manager with the American Camp Association, working on the Character at Camp Grant Program. We have a Grantee Success Manager, and two of us with Brian make up a 3-person team for the Character Grant Program. Thanks for having us.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you. Thank you. So anytime that we have guests, we're going to get to our quick camp question in a second, and camp stories. Like all camp people, we've got a story. We've got kind of an origin story. We're going to share that in just a second. Everybody, we just want to give you a quick plan, a quick agenda of sorts. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to introduce these guys via their camp stories. We love to give every guest a chance to do that. And then we're going to talk a little just about the foundation of the Character at Camp initiative and the Character at Camp Grant Program, and talk about kind of there's this wave one. We're just kind of in the midst of this wave one, and some results, some interesting info about wave one, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what's ahead. Wave two's coming soon, and so we'll talk about what's coming up and some kind of keys to success. It's kind of nice to hear keys to success from a grantee, somebody whose title is literally Grantee Success, right? And so one, I love that ACA enables that, cares about that, right? It actually puts people in place to help folks make these things go well and make an impact and make a difference. I love that. We'll talk about some timeline and what's ahead. And then also a chance to just talk about how Christian camps and ACA are really great partners and connect. So that's our plan. So as we do that, we want to, like I said, give these guys a chance to just share where they're coming from, share why camp matters to them via our quick camp question.
Quick camp question.
All right, our traditional guest quick camp question. Tell us about your camp origin story.
Jared, thank you for asking. I'm still getting used to this whole working at the American Camp Association thing. Been there for just a little bit over a year. It's silly, fancy job title, ACA, working for ACA. And a thing that I really believe in is that folks make connections to individuals, not institutions. And so it's nice to present myself to you and your audience as an individual. And if you don't mind, I kind of feel like I'm in this mood of looking way back. My parents are about to have their 50th wedding anniversary. And as I get older and older, that it makes me continue to realize like how miraculous of a thing that is, how much luck and grace and hard work goes into that. And so I was thinking about them recently and how they met while working at camp. So that in some ways, my camp origin story starts with the foundation of their relationship. They worked together.
I love that.
They worked together at Quaker Lake Camp south of Greensboro, North Carolina. They both grew up on farms in rural North Carolina and kind of very religious, Christ-centered Quaker families. Slightly different regions of North Carolina, worked together at Quaker Lake. My dad went to divinity school and then moved up to Maryland, where I lived for most of my life. And then I went to Quaker camps in the Mid-Atlantic region. And so my origin story is going to these Quaker camps in Maryland, in the mountains of Maryland and Virginia, started when I was 9. I tracked it. I was like, 19 of 20 summers in a row attending or working at those camps. And so foundational experience to who I am as a person, my value set, my friendships, my communities, my wife. We met just like my parents. We met working at summer camp. And then, like a lot of folks in their 20s or 30s, can't keep the camp life going forever. Not too many full-time year-round jobs. So invested in a career in education and teaching, working in the schools in DC mostly, and then found my way back and in kind of like an executive director
camp does that
role running those same camps that I grew up going to. And so the camp in general, those Quaker camps in particular, like probably the foundation of a lot of parts of my personality, also my kind of core values and philosophical outlook on the world. So thanks, parents. They met at camp, and the camp's been a big part of my story ever since.
I love that. Thanks, Brian. Dave, tag, it's your turn.
Yes. So I was one of those people that was invited to go apply to work at a camp from a college friend. So all those camp professionals thinking about staff recruitment, the friends recruiting friends method is very effective. But yeah, I was at a small Methodist college, and a lot of students there were counselors at a nearby Methodist camp. And they said, hey, you should go work at this camp. And my professor had a connection there and said, you'd be a great camp counselor. I'm like, okay. I didn't really think much of it. And that was the start of 17 summers in a row of working at camps, Methodist and Episcopal camps across the Southeast, seasonal and then into year-round roles across 7 different camps in Florida, Georgia, and North Carolina. And so, yeah, I served as after going to seminary after college, after having interned at a camp in North Georgia. Loved my seminary experience. I went to seminary because I thought, okay, after my internship at a camp, I think I could do this for a living. This is great. This is amazing. This feels like a calling. This is awesome. And I went to seminary, and in my first week, said, I don't think I'm supposed to be here, because it felt like everybody else was going to be a senior pastor of a local church. And I was like, I don't think I'm called to do that. And one of my friends who had already been there for a year said, this is not preparing everybody to do that specific thing. And by the time they're done in seminary, God's going to change what they thought they were going to do. But this is preparing people to view the world in a specific kind of way. And I was like, okay, that sounds vague enough to where, like, if I end up doing camp ministry forever, I can do that. If it's something changes, that sounds great. So I stuck with it, and I interned at different Methodist camps throughout that time in North Carolina. And then after seminary, I was hired at an Episcopal camp to be a program director, and then moved on to a Methodist campus and assistant director. And then after 17 summers left, and ended up being here at ACA. Similar to Brian, was like, wow, ACA? I'm working ACA? This is awesome. I didn't think this was in my trajectory, but what a joy when I thought that I was walking away from the camp industry, that now I get to support camps all over the country. So that's how I ended up here. And it's such a great overlap with my background with faith-based camps and going to seminary, that I get to study character development and talk with camps that are doing great character development, and talk about why people have these types of values is a really great overlap with my experience and what I'm doing now.
Yeah, amen. Thanks, gentlemen. All right, you guys, love hearing people's stories and the thread that led them to where they are. So like you said, Brian, part of your role, Dave, really a lot of your role is focused on character at camp in particular. And so I'm hoping that you would give us just some overview, right? Pretend we've never heard of it. Pretend you're telling somebody what this thing is, kind of for the first time. So give us a little bit about character at camp, the story of character at camp in particular. And then we'll kind of get into the grant program. The reason, just to set the foundation and remind people why this matters, right? So like we gather a ton of data around Christian camping in particular, and we said this a couple of weeks ago again on the podcast, but just in case, character development is the number one thing that people are sending their kids to camp for. At Christian camps even. I think these are the kinds of things that they are choosing camp on purpose because of this. This is the number one thing that parents want, that parents expect out of camp, is for their camper to develop character, to develop these really key character traits through these unique experiences. And there's this great list of them, even in the things that you sent over, you guys are studying some really interesting things and the things that are developing. Just to set the foundation, we're talking about this so darn much because it matters so darn much, right? Because it is critical to parents' hopes, desires, expectations of their kids' camp experience, and thus their families, their communities, etc. So, Brian, tell us about character at camp. Give us the quick origin story of this in particular, and bring us to where we are.
Yeah, we could talk a little bit about, maybe we will, more deeper philosophical conversation about the term character and the kind of emergence and salience of that term as like a unifying framework that is motivating parents, is motivating camp practitioners, other educators, is motivating policymakers and funders. We could talk about the like why character and why now, and kind of the energy and movement behind it. The bullet points about what the initiative is. So the Character at Camp initiative was launched in 2023, a gift from a partnership with the Lilly Endowment Incorporated and the American Camp Association. And the Character Camp initiative is this big old thing that includes other stuff besides the Character Grant Program. The Character Grant Program is a part of it, a big part, but a part of the larger Character Camp initiative. The larger Character Camp initiative designed to support, nurture, facilitate increased character development across the entire camp industry in a lot of different ways. The Character Grant Program is a national grant-making initiative designed to strengthen character development at camps across the U.S. Part of that large gift, $28 million, will be re-granted by the American Camp Association to camps across the country over kind of multiple waves of this grant program, which we can talk about some of those details in a little bit. And the grant program is designed to support every different kind of camp you could find in the country, every size and scale, every design, every kind of like part of a larger association, larger collective, larger network, small individual camps, et cetera, et cetera. It's designed to support all camps at every stage of their development, of their arc, from their planning grants for camps that really need to build their capacity, full implementation grants, and also network level grants for networks of camps to work together and support. And so the Character Camp Grant Program, and I like that you asked this question because I'm continuously surprised that folks are like, character. Like, I feel like we have annoyed people by talking about character so much over the last couple of years, but you'll still come across folks at ACA conferences who are like, tell me about this character initiative. I'm like, so, all right, great. Here we go. Character 101. So it's nice to level set. And then also just to emphasize the intention of the grant program and the initiative, but the grant program specifically, is to invite in and welcome in as many camps as possible. Camps who have never been or connected to, have not previously connected to ACA, to really grow the field, the entire field of camp around this shared concept of character development.
Yeah. Amen. Can we do what you said, Brian? I would love to hear some of what, because we all have in our heads, of course, we're like, yes, this matters, right? This, these character pieces matter as we put a Christian lens on it. Like, this is how our call comes out. This is how our identity in Christ comes out is in these things, in these, different character traits and the ways that they especially, affect the world around us, affect each other. Anytime that we, and in the research we're doing, there's thought and heart and, like you say, philosophy behind these things, right? It didn't just choose kind of this idea of character. I appreciate what you said about character. It has been this galvanizing and unifying kind of thing across industry and beyond. So let's do it for a minute. I'd love to hear from both of you. Where do you think, where does this come from? Why has, this word, this idea, these things been the thing to build all this around?
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I think that there's a history in the camp industry as a whole of outdoor recreation and fun. And then there's, so from its beginning, but also there's a movement to say that's a tool to something more deeper, right? The activities are teaching something about life, and fun is a tool to get there. And so if it's done seamlessly, then kids are having fun, and then they all of a sudden come home, a better person, or they've gotten better habits or eliminated bad habits or whatever it may be. So I think that has been growing over the decades. And, there's certain words that come up that are like, oh, this is what we're going to focus on for those deeper meanings, like social emotional learning skills, and maybe character is now a part of that as a subset of that, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe SEL is a subset of character. But I think that's the kind of movement, and that's where the stage we are in this movement, the evolution of why character. I think it's understanding the shift of it's not just about recreation and fun, but that's rather a tool to doing something deeper and more meaningful. And so what is an umbrella word that most camps can kind of get behind? I think character kind of has that traction because ACA is such a big tent organization. As Brian said, we have camps that are huge numbers, small numbers, run 10 sessions, run one session in all different regions of the country. And so what's a word that's going to have enough traction that kind of gets at what we mean, but also has some flexibility so that people can have some cultural responsiveness into how they define character for their context. So I think broadly, that's where I think we've landed with this word character in recent years. Brian, what do you think?
There's something about this moment that I think a lot of people can resonate with the idea of investing in character development. And for a term, for a concept, for a framework to be relevant, to be resonant to lots of different folks, it has to just kind of meet that moment. I think one thing that we have been seeing, and I think other folks have been seeing, is for camp staff and camp directors, for parents, for education leaders, for policymakers, for funders, for lots of folks across our country and society, there's this feeling of like something's happening right now and has been maybe building, and we need to invest in character development and character strengths and character traits and values so that both for ourselves as adults and leaders and parents and teachers and counselors, for our own character development, but also for the young people under our care. And, we can dive into all the different things that are happening in that moment. But I think if what I said is true, all your listeners are like probably nodding, be like, yeah, I understand. We don't need to go through all the bullet points of what has been happening over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years and some larger societal shifts. And then the term character increasingly feels, as Dave was saying, is like a big tent concept, a big tent framework that in theory, lots of different educators and families and camps can find a home within. Maybe character development is how they describe their work. Maybe it's not, but that's okay. They can kind of find a shared home underneath that umbrella. And one of the reasons why I think it works as that shared home is because it has, as you dive into the literature of character development, it has shared meanings, shared mechanisms, but distinct meanings, in the sense that like the activities, the the different practices that support character development are maybe not universal, but broadly shared across lots of different contexts, even if the kind of outcomes might be distinct to those contexts. So in our character grant application packet, we ask folks to pick the character traits or character strengths, character values that they focus on. And we have a hilariously long list of like, how many is in the list? 25. We get like 25 different character strengths. And nonetheless, maybe like half of the, 800 applicants added an additional one in the little other box. So there's so many different ways in which character
Interesting.
development can manifest, and that's incredible. That's a strength of the concept, and it allows for
Mhm.
different camps, different families, different communities to define what good character looks like in the way that's correct for them. But then underlying it, what leads to that character development can be shared and can find commonality across different contexts.
Thank you guys. That's incredibly helpful. I appreciate knowing the heart behind these things, right? Because like Brian, in my the word innovation's in my title too. Sometimes that the scale is just a tad different on from from Sacred Playgrounds to the whole ACA, but I think what is interesting in the idea of innovation right now is not just you sort of changing or trying something different or trying something new for the sake of that, but finding this thing that matters, finding this idea that matters, and then building something off of that, right? So like it's really helpful to so there's these waves, and we'll talk about some of the structure and things like that in a second, but like that, what came first was saying it was a lot of conversations and a lot of a lot of reading and a lot of wondering and a lot of saying, hey, what's this thing that brings us together? What could we then build? That's where like real innovation is incredible, impressive, interesting, when we can go, what can we build? What kinds of structures and experiences and processes can we put in place to take this from here to here? That is interesting. That is what kind of real innovation feels like to me.
One of the profound challenges I've experienced working at ACA, but also one of the incredible opportunities, it's the same thing. The challenges and opportunities are usually the same thing,
Amen, right?
is that the scale. ACA has, we have members, obviously, that we're trying to serve, member camps, but also the economic impact study from a couple of years ago showed us that, there's over 20,000 camps across.
Mm-hmm.
And in theory, an organization calling itself the American Camp Association is trying to be a big tent that all 20,000 can find a home in.
Find themselves in, yeah.
And what a big challenge and what a really cool opportunity. And so one of the things we're trying to do is develop initiatives and programs that have some sort of shared language that then but also can be appropriate to different contexts. All the different camps, wherever you are, whoever you serve, like whatever your orientation or focus or scale or size or your program design, can find useful tools and shared frameworks that can be resonant and relevant in your context. Which is, we don't always succeed at that, but that's the intention and that's the challenge and the opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So let's go. Let's start talking about what things are like for folks. We are kind of in the middle, or maybe I guess at the tail end, kind of this first wave, right? So you've structured this in some waves. The experience for folks in some waves, the grant program in particular, and so you've learned a lot already in this first wave. So can we talk through some of that? Can we talk about wave one a little bit? Talk about kind of the findings, the results, what you know about folks who connected, who applied, who got it. What's going on? Let's talk about wave one. If it's helpful to kind of lay out a little structure overall, but that's where we are now.
Yeah, sure. So there's the application stage and then the grantee stage. There were over 870 total applications, and there's
Wow.
Yeah,
Already. Like,
I know.
We said the word scale a couple times, and I'm sorry, I'm already just jumping in to say, like, this is it. We've all got our little focus, right? Like people who applied or whatever, we've got our little focus on our thing, and it's hard to understand the scale. And so,
and numbers are funny. Numbers can like occlude the like deeper meaning. It's like, 870. And it's like, actually it's 870 individual camps with whole universes and stories on their own who sat down and wrote a really long grant application.
right.
And so, it's incredible. And we can tell more about like what that number means and what we've learned from just that number alone. But 870 camps applied for a character grant in wave one.
Yeah.
Dave, I interrupted you. Thank you. Yeah.
Brian said earlier about there being, in a recent study, we found over 20,000 camps in the country. Well, we used to think it was around 5,000. And so you think like, well, we almost had 1,000 applications. So, that's a huge chunk of what we used to think was the total amount of camps. there's a lot of people that were interested in this. There's almost 500. So the grant program is split into three pathways: an implementation grant pathway, and that's when a camp is ready to go. They have the capacity to manage the grant, and they have an idea to implement right away. And so there's about 500 who applied for that. And then the planning grant pathway, and that's a 1-year grant, and that's for the purpose of building capacity to manage grant and developing an idea to propose in an implementation grant application after that 1-year planning grant. And so we had about 300 apply for that. And then there's the network planning grant application. And that's for 1 year to again plan, followed by submitting an implementation application for the network. And as Brian said earlier, the network is potentially 6 or more camps, either geographically clustered or across the country. We had all types of models apply. And there were about 70 that applied for that. So the application stage had a ton of interest. There's about 2/3 were ACA members and 1/3 were non-ACA members. And this grant program is open to members and non-members both.
Yep.
Brian, do you want to share a little bit about the grantee?
One thing we were really excited about that applicant pool, and you never know how successful your outreach and engagement and communication strategies are. You're like, you do your best for a podcast, for a camp, for ACA. Like we do our best to spread the news and spread the word. But we weren't sure how much, and we were thrilled not just by the number, but by the breadth of the applicant pool and how the applicant pool was broadly representative of the field as a whole.
Yeah, that matters.
Camps from all 50 states, including and plus DC, right near my home. So camps from all across the country applied. Every different kind of way you could categorize camps, different affiliations, different regions, etc. So and again, broadly aligning with the trends and percentages we know, like how the camp industry is organized. So that was a thrill. We can always do more work to spread the news, spread the word about the grant program, invite folks in. But that made us feel good. They're like, okay, the work we've done so far is having a good impact. And also made it be like, not necessarily, we were thrilled then to take those 870 applications and have the volunteer review process do its work and kind of see what comes from that. So I can talk more about the volunteer review process, but we have a kind of rubric that we train volunteers from the camp industry or other youth development industries. We train them on the rubric, and they kind of 2 volunteer reviewers score each application. So you can imagine it's a lot of volunteer reviewer time. And then from that, kind of develop this kind of final grantee list. So of those 870 applications, 77 grantees were selected and given grant awards during Wave 1. 46 of those grantees were ACA members, 31 were non-members, so even a bit like 60-40 split. And then again, all regions were represented. 32 states have at least one grantee, and then all the different kind of affiliations that the different ways in which camps organize themselves were of those 77. Just a couple more facts and figures, because I actually think it's really helpful to be specific. And this
absolutely
is a cool story. 77 grants were awarded. A little over $10.6 million was awarded in Wave 1 for those 77 grantees. Some of them for 1-year grants, a lot of them for 2 and 3-year grants. Those 77 grantees touch about 1.3 million annual participants. We had a bunch of kind of small camps, but also some big camps and big networks. And I can talk about the networks as well. So 38 implementation grants, those multi-year doing a thing grant.
They're ready to go and do it. Yep.
Ready to go. And so 8.5 million given out for 2 and 3-year grants to those 38 different camps. 25 planning grants. This wasn't intentional, but we were not surprised at this was the outcome, that a lot of those planning grants are smaller camps who need the investment of time and money into their internal capacity.
To build that capacity, sure.
Build that capacity. And so, a little over $1 million given out to those 25 planning grantees. And then 14 network grants were given out. And those 14 networks touch 1.1 million annual participants. Some of those networks, I can go into who some of those networks are, but, some networks have 6, 8, 10 camps tightly organized. Some networks have 100 or multiple hundreds of camps that they work with and touch and connect to. And so working with those networks is a really cool opportunity to build our internal knowledge about how to support dissemination and innovation at scale, how to support like leverage network effects, et cetera, and also work with these partners in the camp industry who are similarly committed to impacting as many young people, as many participants as possible. And so across those three pathways, we gave out a bunch of grants and a lot of money. And we, at the same time, and we could talk more about this later, to go back to two, we were overwhelmed in all the best ways by the depth and quality of those 872 applications. And there were so many, let's say countless, but I'm giving you numbers, but there were so many camps that applied and submitted incredibly high quality applications that were worthy of funding, that deserve to be funded, that were not able to be funded because of how competitive the process was in Wave 1. And that tells a bunch of different stories. One story it tells me is a really optimistic one about the state of the industry, how much high quality character development work is already happening out there, and how ready many camps are to level up, to increase or expand, to improve in different ways. And so it tells a really cool story about the state of the industry to me, and also is this big imperative to me and to us to be like, all right, let's keep doing this. Let's keep doing this in Wave 2. Let's keep doing this. Let's tell this story at a higher level so that more and more camps can receive the support and funding that they are ready for, that they're worthy of, so they can improve their programming for the young people they serve.
Yeah, that makes sense that really is both inspiration and confirmation of the good work, right? Okay, so let's semi-pause because you said this, but let's put some numbers to it for these Wave 1 grantees for our stat of the week.
Stat of the week. Stat of the week. Stat of the week.
Our stat of the week this week we wanted to share, and like as usual we'll kind of create a graphic for this, and but it's interesting to see as we've talked about this scale, some of these numbers. So Brian, go ahead.
8.8%. That is the percentage of Wave 1 applicants who got a grant. And that is a very, very low number. And it indicates an extremely competitive.
Feels like it, of course, right?
Yeah, a very competitive grant program. I talked about it wasn't just competitive in terms of quantity of applications, but quality as well. The 50th percentile score, like 0 to 100, the two volunteer reviewers scored each application. 50th percentile, the median score was 78%, which is a pretty good application. The 75th percentile score was 86%, a really good application. So you could have gotten an 86%. I tell this to camps a bunch who are reaching out, like, hey, why don't we get a grant? And we can all improve always. I'm sure there's some things every applicant could improve. And also, the answer is often, you submitted a really great application. It was just an extremely competitive process, and you were just below. And so we can talk about some of those tips and tricks, some things we've learned about what differentiates those high top scores from the vast majority of very good applications. But we were blown away by that kind of 8.8% number.
Yeah.
And it lights a fire for us to make sure that the grant program, the process is meaningful and worthwhile. Because if it's only a worthwhile thing for the camps that get the funding, then that's a failure on our part because not that many camps will get it. And so how can the process of engaging in the grant program, engaging the application, coming together as a team to put something forward, how can we make sure that we're supporting camps so that the process itself is worthwhile and meaningful?
Yeah.
So Brian talked about the process of applying being meaningful. For those who applied in Wave 1, that there's a self-assessment, but that's not something that's scored in the application. It's really just for your own edification and learning about where you are in your camp's journey in doing character development. And there's asked through different questions through different categories. And so that's something we thought be something worthwhile for people to explore for their camp. Even if they don't get a grant, it helps them start to think about character in meaningful ways. And it's a robust application, but it's not impossible. It is tangible. It gives you something to think about. And what we heard over and over again was that applicants said, we're so grateful for the opportunity to just talk about character. because we're so busy doing the nuts and bolts of camp, we don't slow down and talk about character as much as we should. And this application forced us as a team to talk about what do we value and how do we want to do character development. So that's the kind of goal that we wanted to get out of just simply doing the application.
That's helpful. I feel like, yeah, I mean, as I think back to my, my camp summers, my college camp summers, and of course, like we want to debrief these activities and we want to connect them to Jesus, and we want to meet our mission in that way. And what we have learned in the research that we're doing for sure, again, is like, this is what parents want and this is what's happening, right? Yes, of course we want faith to get developed, and what's happening and what is, and how sort of our faith is different than maybe just a checkbox of something we want to develop, but like this is embedded, right? This is embedded in self-confidence. This is embedded in leadership and perseverance and competence and belonging. And like you sent me this list, right? You've got this whole list of these things that, we're part of scoring here, and it's embedded and drives through all that. And so, I think that's interesting. I was looking at this character strength frequency list that you guys had sent as part of all of this data. It was interesting how high leadership was, and in part clearly like kind of the number one there, which aligned highly with, like, we've talked about some of the staff findings and things like that. By far the thing that gets developed most, especially through staff experiences, is their leadership ability, right? That's the thing that they self-assess, to your point there, Dave, is the thing that, like, I'm confident in my leadership abilities, ends up being the top thing, especially for a camp staff experience. And it's high for campers too. All right. So feel free to wrap anything else that is helpful for wave one here. And then can we move to, because we have a couple of things we want to hit, and I feel like we could talk all darn day. Let us anything else that feels like to kind of put a bow on what's been happening and what's been learned in wave one, and then can we start to kind of look at what's next, look at what's ahead?
Yes. There's we always want to engage in continuous improvement. So we've received feedback on wave one, and we've made adjustments for wave two. So in terms of requirements of grantees, we're looking into that, as well as the application itself and making it more accessible. So we've streamlined some of that, made things easier to flow through the application. And for those who are applying for wave two and you already applied for wave one, it should be a better experience, a noticeably better experience. And for those who didn't apply for wave one and are applying for wave two, you don't know what it was for the first one, but you should have a good time with the second one.
Still going to be great. Awesome. Okay.
All I'll say is that I'm not going to repeat a couple things that I said in a webinar that's on the ACA website. So your listeners, if they are curious about diving deep into some of our learnings from wave one and our kind of guidance, high level guidance for like improving or writing a more competitive grant proposal for wave two, they're all in there. But the one thing I'll say is, and a big theme of what I have been talking about to a lot of folks this winter and spring, is like, all right, such a competitive grant program. What's the point? Why apply? Why is it worth my time? I'm a busy camp director, probably not going to get the money. Why is it worth the time? And the thing I keep coming back to and I emphasize over and over again is that the skills required to write a competitive grant proposal are are skills that are transferable in other ways. So like I said, it's on us to make sure we are kind of designing an application process that is relevant and meaningful in other ways, not just about whether you get the grant or not. But to write a competitive grant proposal requires sharp program design. And so coming together to sharpen your program design, and that'll lead to program improvement, improved program implementation. I've talked to a lot of applicants who didn't get the grant who were like, hey, just the process of thinking through what we would do if we got allowed us to be like, oh, we can do a couple of that this summer, even with no money, and we can improve. And also, a competitive grant proposal requires very clear articulations of your methods and rationale. A lot of camp folks, myself very much included, like for a long time, I know what I'm doing. I know what we're doing, that it works. But if I'm explaining it to someone else, it's sometimes kind of hard to exactly articulate why it works, why we do this, not this, etc. So to improve your ability to articulate those methods or rationale, helps with the grant proposal, but also helps with your communication to your staff, to
Big time.
parent, to other stuff. So hopefully I want to make sure folks find the process meaningful in lots of other ways. And I'll just give a quick shout out. Let us know, let me know, everyone listening, if you if we're not meeting that mark, because we want to design a grant program that is worthwhile, worthy of your valuable time with all the camp folks out there.
So what you started to get to already was somewhere we wanted to get, which is like you said, Dave, your title is literally like your job is designed for grantee success, right? And so, well, you both just hit on a couple of these things, and we'll talk about some like actual actionable next steps for them here in a second. But I do want to hit on that for a minute, make sure that we can say, what we want to say there, like what you started to say, some of these keys, like to a really great grant application. And so I'm curious both about anything more you would say about that. Like what are these things that are really helpful when we are writing all these applications? And then even as that leads into like, as we implement and evaluate, we'll maybe get there in a minute too. So grant success manager, what are some of these keys to success? Brian, feel free to tag back in too, as it makes sense. But like what makes a difference here, Dave?
Yes. So I think some of the commonalities between the low scoring applications versus the what's frequent and high scoring applications is a good thing to look at. And we did a webinar that's accessible to everybody who applied for Wave 1, and you're curious how to improve. Go into your ACA online account, and then you can access that. But just to a quick overview, just give a quick overview. If you can think of it like an academic paper, have a thesis statement. There's strong applications. There's a great elevator pitch to it, to where they know exactly what they want to do. And if you get on an elevator and you pitch it to somebody, by the time you get off at your floor and you part ways, that person who you said it to can walk down the hall to somebody else and say, "Hey, I just heard about this grant application. This is what they're going to do." And that person walks back and finds the applicant and says, "Hey, I heard you're doing this." And the applicant says, "That's exactly what we're doing." So that's an indication of a strong thesis, a good pitch. Mm-hmm. And so if our volunteer reviewers are reading through a grant application, and then after they get to the end of it, they're like, "Man, that was like 50 different things they're proposing, and they're not really connected. I don't really know what they're doing." That's an indication of a low scoring application. So starting with a great idea, and then having a thesis, and then all the supporting evidence all throughout your application backing that up. And Brian made a great observation to me that he observed that the great scoring applications, it was evident they had some sort of theory of change in their application, in what they're proposing for character development. There should be some type of need that is expressed, and then how you're going to meet that need. So those are the overview points that I would share about difference between a low scoring application and a high scoring application. Brian, would you like to give some more details to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say one of the coolest parts of this job for me is stepping into this job after kind of running my camps was expanding the aperture of what camp is, and like how many all of a sudden it's like, oh, there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of camps out there, the vast majority, maybe all of them, doing incredible work. And so when engaging in a competitive grant program like this that's open to camps all across the country, two like high-level bits of guidance I've been giving to applicants or potential applicants is try to think like a reviewer. Put yourself in the mind of someone who's reviewing 5, 10, 15, 20 different applications, compare and so they're not just reading yours. Yours is probably pretty good. You're probably doing, almost all camps, in my experience, are doing great work and are worthy of receiving more funding. But how do you differentiate yourself? How are you seen through the eyes of somebody who's maybe only got 10 minutes to spend with your application? Does it make sense? To Dave's point, is the elevator pitch clear? Is the theory of change clear? And then the second high level guidance I give is to articulate how the grant program will maximize impact. We all could use more money and more time.
Of course, right. But
this gift, like this grant award, how will it maximize impact both internally and externally? Internally being what will it allow you to do that you would not be able to do otherwise? Something that aligns with what you're already doing is mission aligned, kind of what will it unlock for you as a camp, as an organization? And then external impact, how will it impact your campers? How will it impact your staff, your families? How it might it impact the larger community in a way? And so articulating very clearly that those two sides of impact of this particular grant award that you're applying for, I think really helps a reviewer see, like, not only are you a camp doing great work worthy of funding, but actually you're like, oh, you kind of rise above the rest and you really become a competitive applicant at that point.
Thank you guys. That's super helpful. Yeah. And it sounds like I said, the ones that applied, I'm just kind of reiterating this, like they can go access some of these other, you dove into that more on this webinar that they have some access to. So check that on one of the action steps potentially if if you're looking at wave 2, especially if you applied on wave 1 to go take a look at those things. Okay, that's helpful. Big time. Some of those keys to success. So we're getting close here. Talk about what's ahead, right? So we're getting close to wave 2, kind of opening, right? Talk about what's next.
Yeah, so wave 2 of the Character Grant program is going to open soon this spring is our intention. And we're just kind of finalizing a couple last little things, and we'll then
of course
share it out with the world, with the whole field. We're going to open in the spring, not because it'll be due in the spring, but just we want to get the application in the hands of camp folks as early as possible so they can take a look at it, start working on it, start thinking about it with their teams before the big rush of the summer comes. And then
That's helpful.
It'll be open soon, and then the deadline will be October 1st, which is a little earlier than last year because I can go into why, but hopefully still plenty of time with a little bit of time in the spring and then time after the summer to submit your application by October.
To get there.
And the pathways that'll be open are the same, pretty similar to the ones last time. The planning grant, kind of 1 year up to $50,000 grant award for planning, for capacity building. The implementation grant pathway, up to 3 years, up to $300,000 to do a thing. And then the network implementation grant. So for networks that applied for, whether they received or didn't receive a network planning grant, they can now apply for a network implementation grant, which is, again, 3 years, up to $300,000. And so all those applications, the planning and implementation applications, will look very similar to, as Dave said, in the spirit of continuous improvement, we are always refining and improving and responding to feedback and making the application experience better. So there's some small refinements. Hopefully you won't even notice them. You'll just feel that they're better. Very small refinements. If you applied in wave 1, you are more than welcome, more than encouraged to apply again in wave 2. We can all improve, but if you want to just copy paste, the application is very, very similar. So it should be pretty straightforward for folks who want to reapply.
Awesome. All right, we'll wrap with some other action steps. I have one more question I want to ask before we go, and we're going to kind of use this as a bonus quick camp question. Maybe I'll even play the jingle here in a second. But yeah, here, ready, go. All right, bonus quick camp question. And we actually already answered this one time, but you give a different perspective. You give a unique perspective. So in this post-summer pulse check survey we did all the way last summer, we asked people for questions. And it's one of the ways that they've submitted, and we've kind of gone through some of those on the podcast. And a couple of them were specific to ACA. And which is great, right? Because people are thinking about it and connecting. So Jake kind of answered this from his advisory, role with the initiative and things like that. But I'm curious from your perspective, this question that came from a director. And it was this. It was simply, does Christian camping have a place at the table, at the ACA table?
Yes.
Dun, 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 air, end of the...
No,
right.
yeah.
Of course it does,
yes.
Which is what Jake said too, by the way. So the short answer is yes. You guys, like I said, bring some unique perspective. Tell us more.
Yeah, I was going to say yes. Official ACA response.
It's official.
So I want to, Dave, expound a little bit from your experience.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and I've served in Episcopal camps and Methodist camps, and you've got your community in your Christian camp denomination, and that's helpful and it's good. At the same time, it's good to live outside your community as well, to learn from others that are similar but different from you. And so, the Outdoor Ministry Connection does the Great Gathering Conference every 6 or so years, and that's when all the different denominations of camps come together. And and learn from each other and fellowship together and worship together. And that's good. Iron sharpens iron, as it were. And similarly, it's good to hear from people that are a little bit more different, but have a lot of overlap. So in the ACA, it's a big tent association rather. So, it's 4 camps, all camps. Non-members benefit from the work that ACA does.
Sure.
And so it's good to get out of one's bubble and learn how others are doing camp. It helps you improve. It helps you reflect on how you do what you do. And it can go both ways, right? It can help you reflect, oh, this is why we do this way. And after learning about how other people are doing camp, I feel even more affirmed about how we're doing camp. Or you learn something new and you realize, no, we can better serve our mission if we do what we just learned over there from that other camp in a different type of setting. Tremendous value in Christian camps being involved in ACA. And ACA benefits tremendously from Christian camps being in ACA as well. It's, like I said before, it's for the whole camp industry. And if we're missing a huge chunk, then we're incomplete. So it goes both ways in terms of the benefit and value shared across.
Yeah, all I'll add is that an organization purporting to call itself the American Camp Association that did not have a place at the table for faith-based camps in general, Christian camps specifically, would be, as Dave said, incomplete, would be historically illiterate, would not actually encompass the broad, vast, diverse traditions of camp in America. And I don't need to say this to you or your listeners, but Christian camps, faith-based camps more broadly, are such an integral part of both the history and the present moment of camping in America. And so, yes, there's a place at the table. I want to say that definitively. And also, being at that big table, being under that big tent, all the other folks at that table under that tent have something to learn from faith-based camps, from Christian camps, and vice versa. In a lot of ways, the American Camp Association is a learning community in a lot of ways. It's a space for all of us to listen to learn from each other. And that doesn't mean we all do everything everyone else does. That doesn't mean one thing is better or worse necessarily than what might be right in one context, might be different in another context, within one tradition, another tradition, etc. But it's a community that requires both making space and taking space. So we all have to make space for each other, and we also have to take our space. So for whoever asked that question, I would say yes, there's space, and also invite you to take it, and to be a part of that big tent.
Yeah.
To contribute to that conversation, to that shared learning process. And being a part of a big tent, being at a big Thanksgiving table with lots of different extended family members sometimes might not always be as easy as being just with your friends or just with your community. And there's a place for both of those. That's why there's lots of different levels. There's lots of small tents within the big tent, but just that invitation that we all have to make space at the table, and we also all have to take our space at the table as well.
And there are so many ways to engage with ACA. Accreditation and the conferences, I think, are what most people think of with ACA. And what has happened, a lot of camp professionals remember a time where that only way to do ACA was accreditation. Still working today, but it's for years now, there's been a new category created that's membership. You can have a camp membership. You can also have an individual membership that is different from accreditation.
Right.
So if you want to access the enormous library of continuing education content in the online learning center with no extra charge, you can just have a individual membership, or you can have a camp membership, which comes with 2 individual memberships included for people at your camp. There's that. There's also the online learning center. You can have an account without a membership. There's ways to engage in that way. And like I said before, for many Christian camps, you have your network that you are a part of and conferences that your network organizes. And you think, well, I can only budget one conference a year. We've got our identity, so we may not want to go to the ACA conference as well as our denominational conference. There's other ways to engage to the online learning center, as I said. But also, ACA is doing a lot with advocating for camps at state and federal levels of government. So when policies are made that affect camps, ACA wants to have a table, and increasingly is having a table or a seat at those tables, so that camp is not an afterthought, but camp is a part of making those policies that help all camps, members and non-members included. So there's all kinds of ways to get involved. And I encourage listeners to think about what makes sense for your context and what's going to add value for you, your camp, and your campers, and find a way with ACA, because ACA needs you just as much as you might need ACA as well.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks, you guys. And we really you got to a lot of what we wanted to do right at the end here is leave them with something to do, right? We try to do that, on every one of these episodes. So yes, Wave 2's coming. Watch, in terms of this particular, the character grant program, watch for that, right? And when it comes time, start that conceptualizing and preparing and then even into writing for Wave 2. There's 1. 2, you've got a bunch of ways to connect with ACA. I love that reframing a little bit that you guys just did there with this, think of this as a learning community, not just an accreditation service provider, I think that's really helpful. And so, Dave, I appreciate some of those clear ways to do that. So find another way or two to your point, Brian, kind of take your seat, right? At that table of that. One of the ways that just our team has been kind of connecting most with, like I said, Jake has provided some insight from the kind of an advisory perspective. The other thing that we have been doing a handful of and would love to chat about with people is just helping, we've kind of been written in, or at least thoughts written into some of these grants to say, let's go make sure that you're doing what we say you want to do. That what so in some of the evaluation and research of whatever this thing that you're putting into place is, whether we're kind of tweaking a tool that we've already built or building something creative to do that. So just that's my quick, hey, don't forget to make sure that you are, and it's helpful to write in, hey, we're going to measure what we're doing. We're going to make sure we're doing it well. And as we get into different waves of this, to be able to come back and say, here's what we learned, here's how we know we learned that, is helpful. So just a quick heads up, connect with us about that. You guys, I am incredibly grateful for this. I'm incredibly grateful kind of on behalf of our listeners for this info, for, again, you said this, Brian, this connection to this is people who really care behind all this. And sometimes it's hard to remember that when you're at a scale, right? When you're at an organization that is an umbrella for 20,000, or so camps. And so it's hard to remember sometimes when we're at that scale that there's some really incredible people doing some really good work that have origin stories like yours. And so we're really grateful for the work that you're doing at ACA, for the success that you're helping, usher in, and the impact that you're helping to make. Connect with us, folks, if you want to, hear some more from these guys or hear some more specifics there. We'll make some connections there and are excited for what's ahead for these camps. Thank you, guys. Anything else you want to kind of wrap with for folks?
Thank you, and God bless. Good luck with your ministries this summer. It's going to be great.
Jared, thank you so much for the invitation and the time. It's such a pleasure to speak with you and your audience. And if I might shout out 2 quick things, character@acacamps.org. If you have any questions, want to connect with us about anything at any time, send an email. Dave and I and
love it.
Members of our team will get it. character@acacamps.org. And then if you want to stay up to date, just make sure you're signed up for the ACA Now newsletter. It comes out once a week. It's got lots of other, stuff about ACA, but any big announcements about the character grant program, we'll have office hours that we'll announce there as well. And in the spring and in the fall, have a cool webinar coming up in May about how to use your summer to improve your grant proposal, and a bunch of other resources as well. So if you just send an email to character@acacamps.org and make sure you're signed up for ACA Now, you'll be able to reach all of us and you'll find out about everything. So those are the 2 things.
Love it. We'll drop links for those things in the show notes so people can just go direct from there.
Yeah, and be a part of it.
Thank you.
It's so much fun. It's so much fun to chat with all of you. So reach out.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, guys. On behalf of these listeners, we appreciate you. Thanks, everybody, for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to catch every new episode. If this is helpful for you and your organization and your team, follow the link in the show notes to become a supporter of the podcast. Our theme music was written and performed by Weekend Picnic. Find their original songs anywhere you get your music, or visit them at weekendpicnicband.com. Sacred Playgrounds is generating insights, equipping leaders, and connecting partners to help camping ministries thrive. Learn more about what we've got going on, view current research projects, and connect with our team at sacredplaygrounds.com.